All right, welcome into Full Court Press. Sorry, we are a couple minutes late. We could not get my microphone to work. And what good is a show if you can't hear me? But it looks like we've resolved that. Thank you for everyone that tuned in last night to get the bracket discussion started. We, myself, Rob Vino, Kelly Stewart, Steve Merrill, Brian Power, we watched the bracket unfold in real time. I was not happy, Rob, when I saw Siena get a 16 seed right out of the gate. Not even any suspense, just, oh, here you go. You're going to play the best team in college basketball. I thought they should have been a 15, but that's neither here nor there. Rob, we've now had a night to sort of let the matchup set in. The odds have populated. I have still not made a bet yet on the NCAA tournament. So my question to you is, well, first of all, how's it going this morning? How'd you do yesterday? And second of all, have you bet anything yet?
All right. So first of all, things are good now that we can hear each other. Adam, it was kind of crazy there for a minute, but we're all good now. Last night was fun time, guys. If you did not catch it last night, go back. Maybe we can post the link inside the chat here. You can go back and review what we talked about for 2 hours. Really good conversation, really good insight from, as Adam mentioned himself, Brian Power, Kelly Stewart, Steve Merrill, and myself as we reacted immediately to these games. I have not made a bet yet. I did go 1-1 yesterday. I had the Dayton VCU 8-10 title game under the total, which it did remain under. And I took a shot with Vandy, thinking that maybe Vandy was on a quest. And Arkansas, hey, listen, you and I, as a twosome, praised Arkansas as much as we could praise them last night on the show. I think we might have been lone wolves in that praise. Maybe it was higher than the other folks on the set thought, but boy, Arkansas is impressive. I was going through this stuff, probably, Adam, we're on the East Coast, so probably till about 1:30 a.m. I was hoping to get some NIT lines, which we never got and which we still don't have, but I was going through some NIT action as well. That will be up first out of the box tomorrow, along with the first four games, a couple of first four games. So I guess we could start there and then see what the chat wants to talk about. But again, if you guys missed it yesterday, go back and check out the immediate reactions from us. This is going to be a heck of a tournament. I said yesterday, Adam, on that show, I've never immediate reaction like so many underdogs or thought so many favorites were overvalued in quite some time. And, you know, you have to, immediate reactions aren't necessarily always the be all end all. So you have to go back and review this stuff, but it should be fun, a fun 2 weeks for sure. I lost you.
I had myself muted right there. That was not, okay. There was no problem with that. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I too found myself on the show reacting in real time, gravitating to a lot of underdogs. I think that's natural though. So I think that's like a great talking point to start the show. Because again, we're going to go off of what you guys bring up in the chat. We don't even necessarily have to talk specific games the whole time because again, we're going to have days to do this. But like for me, like, yeah, the bracket gets unveiled. I'm a mid-major guy. I watch a ton of mid-major hoops and kind of know who's, you know, good, who's not, so on and so forth. I'm also, you know, when we're doing the show, let's put it this way. When we're doing the show last night, I see the bracket populated and I'm like, oh, I would really like them this year. They potentially have a chance. They have a chance. Northern Iowa has a chance. Hofstra has a chance. Troy has a chance, right? Every time one comes up, now that I've had a full day to start to go through games, look at the numbers, I'm backing out on a lot more of those underdogs than like, let's say like last night at first glance, I was like, oh yeah, they definitely have a chance. I'm starting to get to the point where I think less of them have an actual chance. So that's also why I didn't like knee jerk. I really don't like to like bet on my first sort of instinct on the game. I'll give you one example. Last year, I had a very good like first couple days of March Madness. And like the one loss was the play I like basically locked in on the selection show was Grand Canyon. I think they were plus an 11.5 against Maryland. I did get a good number. They got destroyed. Second thought I'm gonna make here before I kick it back to you is I feel like the committee or whoever makes this bracket put a lot of they made bad matchups for the underdogs, for the mid majors. they're like feeding a mid-major a team that's going to beat them at their own game in a lot of cases. The one that came to mind that might be a good matchup yesterday, Rob, was Northern Iowa, because I really do think they could slow down St. John's and not give up a ton in transition, force them to score a little bit out of the half court or make shots. But boy, outside of that, even the ones I think have a chance in the matchup, it's like they're going into a team that does what they do better than they do it. That's like the biggest takeaway I got from like looking at all these first round games. So weigh in on that, Rob. What do you think about sort of those two things?
Yeah, it's definitely why you have to let the dust settle, kind of, Adam, and go back to what I would call the drawing board and start evaluating the matchups. I jumped at a bunch. Now, one that I kind of stick to here, even on Monday morning, and we'll see if I come off of it because the numbers starting to go down a little bit, even more so. I thought on the show, High Point had a real chance against Wisconsin. High Point, a team that dominated their league, ended very hot. They draw Wisconsin, who obviously is led by two of the best, maybe arguably one of the best guard tandems in the country. But I thought maybe High Point had elements to negate some of that because they are so perimeter oriented as well. But you're right. Let me ask you a question here. I was going through some stuff and I ran across a little synopsis on Hawaii basketball, Hawaii defense, where Hawaii plays zero help defense. They don't help defenders. They just basically play one-on-one. And I looked at the matchup against Arkansas, and I know that we had immediately reacted like Arkansas will destroy Hawaii. Hawaii is a good basketball team. But I'm thinking to myself, if you're going to send your guys out there to not help against Acuff and company, Billy Richmond Jr., or Billy Richmond, there's a lot of trouble there because you're going to get beat off the dribble a ton in this game. And then, and we're kind of talking X's and O's here, but the pressure point there is right in the lane, either mid-range game or alley-oops for dunks, lobs, so to speak. They would seem to be prevalent for Arkansas here. The more I look at that matchup, the more I almost feel like Hawaii could get destroyed playing the type of defense that they play against this type of team. So to your point, and I don't know that we can call, I guess, we have to call Big West a mid-major. Hawaii a mid-major coming in against Arkansas. Not necessarily what they do best against, or Arkansas what they do best against what Hawaii does best, but just the stylistic matchup, offense versus defense. To me, boy, Arkansas could have a field day offensively against those guys if they want to stick to playing no help defense.
For sure. So I decided what we'll probably do, since we're going to bounce around a lot on this show, we're not going to, we have time later in the week to go sort of deeper into these matchups. So I'm going to start to group some like games together. And the three we just mentioned, in my opinion, are all very similar to me. Hawaii, Arkansas, High Point, Wisconsin, and then Northern Iowa, St. John's. From a numbers perspective, I think the books kind of got these three right. I would almost say that, I agree slightly with High Point taking money at 11.5, but High Point sort of reminds me of my Grand Canyon pick last year. They took a little money, like the books maybe priced it incorrectly out of the gate, but that's not a great matchup for High Point, in my opinion. They're not, Wisconsin doesn't turn the ball over at all. It's another instance of what High Point could do to win a game like this. Wisconsin's good at neutralizing. I think the same thing with Arkansas, Hawaii. I was reading something about, maybe Hawaii will play a zone. It's like, okay, but they haven't, how much have they done that this year? Right. So you mean to tell me that they're going to, within 4 or 5 days, scrap the way they've been playing all year to try a zone against Arkansas? And that's great. I suppose an SEC team or a big time team could go to zone and give Arkansas trouble. I'm not sure Hawaii could if they even were in zone. So again, for me, Rob, and I'll, before we move on, we'll sort of package these three games together. Out of those three, because they're all right in the same vein, where it's like double-digit favorite against lower seed. And I think the numbers are right on all of them. If I had to pick one of those three for a potential upset, I think I would pick Northern Iowa. just because of like the fact that they've looked so good at Arch Madness now that they're fully healthy. And that is one where it's like, if they don't let St. John's get transition points and get to the rim, and you're forcing St. John's to make shots, we know that St. John's has a hard time making shots. So anything from those three before we move it on, that you're interested in potentially making a move on.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to look at High Point. And again, as we speak here, Adam, and we talk a little bit of the fundamentals because that's somewhat how we break it down. But we also include the situationals, and I do wonder about Wisconsin after the tournament run there. These 4 days off it can be either helpful or non-helpful. And I think we all agreed on the panel last night, Northern Iowa. I mean, you and I don't have to talk anymore about Northern Iowa. We've gone through them quite a bit this season. And right now, just the way they are set up with their ability to shoot threes, with their ability to slow a game down, it's frustrating for a team like St. John's that wants to go. And Northern Iowa doesn't necessarily turn it over enough for St. John's to get enough runouts to get one of those, knockout punch type spurts. So I think Northern Iowa probably hangs around. I'll add a couple to this grouping. Vanderbilt McNeese is a double digit type of number, and a game we talked about yesterday that I think we both like to begin with, Troy, Nebraska. I think Troy plus 13.5 still interests me, Adam, against Nebraska. And, I'll let you go ahead and analyze as well. But to me, Troy has the ability, again, a lot like Northern Iowa, can slow the game down. You don't even have to slow it down against Nebraska because Fred Hoiberg's team is going to play slow. You got to get out on their jump shooters, and they just have to find a way. The wild card that we always talk about is Rink Mast. Find a way to rebound if you have to send your big out on the perimeter to get after him. But Troy shows all the instincts, all the qualifications of a team in this particular matchup where maybe they got set up good. I did see an interview with Fred Hoiberg early this morning where he did reference the location of the game, Oklahoma City. He thought Cornhusker fans would travel very well. And I will say that would be a concern where the arena is here, because Troy, I don't know that they'll travel as well. However, just note that as these games go on into the second half, if Troy's in the game, half of that crowd is going to take the underdog side. It happens all the time. So Troy, if they can hang in, probably will have benefit of some more of the crowd than they would normally. So Troy, to me, and boy, I don't know. I love Vanderbilt, but I do know McNeese can cause some defensive problems to you. The problem for me with McNeese is they may not score for a stretch against Vandy. And if that's the case, Vandy shoots it way too well. That's a game that I was on yesterday. And to your point, I'm probably talking myself off of today. I think Vanderbilt is just too consistently explosive, and McNeese is too prone to droughts. So I don't know that I'm as high on taking 11.5 with them as I was yesterday.
Yeah, it's funny. I see McNeese Vandy is one that I think is probably the matchup probably favors Vandy. I'm not like ruling McNeese out by any means, but I think that's probably a not exactly the matchup that they wanted. Whereas, and we'll go back to the Troy. I guess we'll do those two together right now. McNeese Vandy, Troy, Nebraska. I kind of made a case for Troy on the show last night that I'm starting to move away from a little bit. And it's just like one of those things. It's also why I'm not going to like bet instantly, like, knee-jerk reaction type stuff as the bracket comes out. Because I think yesterday we talked about Troy, Nebraska, and I said, okay, well, you're getting a pretty big number. The possessions in the game might be a lower possession type game. Because neither team is, both like to slow it down. I still believe Scott Cross is very capable of like putting together a game plan that slows it down, maximizes the number of possessions Troy does have. But like you said, like Mast being able to Nebraska, the other thing is, if they're moving the ball, spreading it out and their threes are falling, like it might be good night to Troy in that game. So I'm actually sort of off of that one. I feel like I made a case for that one last night that I don't really sort of believe just as much anymore. And that's going to, you know what? Like, that's the biggest challenge here, in my opinion, betting these games. It's like, I tend to not bet them very early and be okay if I miss something and just passing on it, because it's NCAA tournament, Rob. Like, crazy shit happens, for lack of a better, thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this one I may bet, and Garth has asked about it. So let's go to the first four. Garth says 19-8 run going into March Madness. Tuesday, he's looking at UMBC team total over 70.5. Rob, I'm looking at UMBC just to win this game. May just play myself a money line here because it's only -1.5 on the spread. I've seen both of these teams play multiple, like, in person this year. I've followed the America East very closely. That trio of guards, Rob, on UMBC is really good. Valentine, there's three of them, of course. The names is Ace Valentine is one of them, and I'm forgetting the names of the other two. The point is, the last month or so, they have been awesome, just running through the America East. Can take anyone off the dribble. Just totally destroyed Vermont in the second half of that game on Saturday. Like, they're just better than Howard, in my opinion. So why would I not just take a small money line here? My number's actually closer to 4. This might be a bet for me, but also talk about potential team total. Does UMBC get up and over the 70.5 points?
Yeah, I mean, on my short list here for this morning when I was looking was the full game total. I kind of look at the defensive numbers posted by Howard and posted by UMBC and think to myself, they can be somewhat fraudulent. In the case of UMBC, because it's not exactly a pace type conference, and you're going to get a pace team in Howard in this game. And where Howard is concerned, obviously the quality of competition in the MEAC is not up to the level of UMBC. And so I wonder if Howard's defensive numbers aren't just a little bit phony. So when I see this come down to maybe 139.5, thinking to myself, man, this game is very, very much worth playing to the over. You worry about potential jitters with these teams, but I think these two teams will be just fine in Dayton. I don't think we'll have to worry too much about that. And I think they'll both be on the attack. So to Garth's question, UMBC. And really quick, in the Vermont game, Adam, boy, UMBC stretched that lead. I mean, that game was close at the 4-minute mark to go in the game. And then UMBC hit a couple of threes and absolutely stretched out the margin and won going away. Vermont couldn't keep pace. Very close game. Big win by UMBC. But to Garth's question, I think I could see UMBC going over the total here for reasons I just described. I'm not a believer that in this, and this is the great thing about the tournament, that where you have to almost take everything you saw this past weekend or past 2 weeks in these conference tournaments, and I like to just throw it all in the garbage, because once these teams get outside their conference again, it's a whole different story. Like when we watch Michigan struggle with Wisconsin, struggle with Purdue, it's just because you've been in Big Ten play so long. Like, these teams know you inside and out, and now you get to free yourselves. And I heard one coach mention this. He'd be glad to get outside the conference now. And I think that's going to be the case for Howard and UMBC. So, Garth, yes, I would agree. I would also agree, and probably the direction I'm going to follow is full game total over. And thirdly, Adam, I would agree that UMBC is probably a bucket better. We're only laying 1.5 here. And if you go money line, you're just asking to win by a point. I think they're probably the better team.
Yeah, I mean, that's where that's really where I'm sort of starting to gravitate toward UMBC. Is I was closer to like 4 on this, the spread being like UMBC -3.5, -4. So the fact that it's still out there just -1.5, and you can kind of play a pretty cheap money line, definitely appealing. But like, again, like they've played much better defense over the last, like UMBC has played better defense over the last month or so, when they really took over that America East Conference. And, that was an issue for them earlier in the year. In my opinion, was just they've always sort of had the offensive end figured out, but their defense wasn't quite as good. But reason I bring that up is like Howard's a pretty capable team in terms of like putting the ball in the basket. So that's what I'll have to sort of think about. But my number leans toward UMBC, and I am leaning that way as well. So again, we'll see if we I don't know if I'll lock anything in on this show. And we're not going to do a parlay today because we're going to do those later in the week. But like I'll tell you right now, one I've definitely giving some thought to tomorrow is UMBC. All right, let's move along. Let me make sure I'm going to go back to the chat. We got a lot of good chat, on these. So I guess like Rob, I'll throw a general question your way.
Sure.
From a straight up standpoint, do you see a bunch of upsets in the first round, or do you think the favorites advance in a lot of these games?
I feel like the larger favorites, and by large, I mean anything over 5-6 points, those teams are all going to advance. I find it hard to make a case. When you sit down, and I don't prefer to do these things, but obviously we all have family. We all have friends that want to, hey, let's get together and do a bracket pool. And when I sit down and try to do a bracket pool, Adam, I just find it way too hard without a point spread involved to go ahead and move underdogs all the way, through. Now, and upsets are going to happen. We know that. But if you're asking me, I just don't see a case to be made for a lot of these teams that are catching in that, let's say 7+ range. The only one, as I look here really fast before I turn it back over to you, and I wouldn't even put them in this category, but South Florida was +6.5, now down to 5.5. I think South Florida has a legit shot to move on against Louisville. But other than that, I find it hard to make a case for any of these teams winning their games straight up.
Well, let's stay on that game for now because I'm pretty intrigued there as well. Don't worry, Colin. I will rehash that Miami of Ohio take in just a minute. But let's go to the South Florida Louisville game. I believe this is an early tip on Thursday. One of the first games to go out in Buffalo, New York. Of course, you've probably heard the story at this point. Brian Hodgson gets to come back home. He's a Buffalo, New York native. People think he's going to be the Syracuse coach. That's a different conversation for a different time. But the point is, like yesterday, I was almost like, so I had one play yesterday. I cashed with Arkansas. I'm actually kicking myself in hindsight for not playing South Florida -5.5 in that game because someone asked me about it. I basically texted them all the reasons that should be an easy win. And then I didn't play it myself. And then sure enough, they just came out and slammed Wichita, won by like 15. They've been very impressive to me this year, South Florida. Like, kind of ran through the American, which I think the American personally was better just because Memphis had a down year. It wasn't necessarily a bad year for the conference. Like Tulsa had a really good team. Wichita State came on late. Like, so that to me is I don't know that South Florida got enough credit for what they did this season. And now you're going up against Pat Kelsey, who's like really struggled in any sort of big game. And Louisville's going to have to lay 5.5, 6, and they're probably going to do what they always do, Rob. Just chuck threes up, hope they hit half of them and win. Like this is one I'm also close with. South Florida +6, +5.5 feels like it should be more like 2.5 or 3 to me on a neutral. So talk to me a little bit about that. Pat Kelsey, Brian Hodgson, Louisville, South Florida. Are you close to making a play in that one, I guess?
And there's not much difference between them, Adam. We get this. We talked a little bit about this yesterday on the show, the immediate reaction show. Last night, Steve Merrill had made the point that, if a fast team plays a fast team, then you play the favorite because they do it better. And I brought up this game, and I had mentioned I don't know that would apply here. South Florida can do everything that Louisville does. And in a 40 minutes win or go home, I mean, Enos and Pinion can make threes as well as anybody. Nelson's the player of the year inside that conference. And you might have to do this if you're Louisville without Michael Brown. We'll see what the injury status is there as we go along. But we've seen time and time again with Louisville, they're basically going to allow South Florida to play this style. And again, Adam referenced Brian Hodgson. For those who don't know, we'll say it for those who don't. He's an Alabama disciple, a Nate Oates disciple. So this game's going to be a track meet up and down the floor. Louisville's not going to duck it. South Florida is going to want to press the gas even harder. And this is an instance where the underdog has as good a chance, as good of a possibility to go on that 12-0 spurt as any favorite does. I just mentioned a couple of other games where the dog scares me because the favorite could go on a run. Here, the dog is fully capable. And I'll just add this really quick here. We do a lot with the eye test, Adam. I know we put numbers to everything and use it in our analysis, but we also watch a boatload of games. And to me, South Florida, as the season went on, just got better and better and started to create larger and larger margins. I think they're probably rounding into form at the right time of season. They're playing their best basketball. And I don't know that I can say the same about Louisville. They've got nice talent, but the ACC was sorted down. Let me ask you this. Don't you think South Florida could have competed on a decent 500 type basis inside that ACC this year? I think they could have.
Absolutely. They're yeah, for sure. Especially if they drew a schedule with like a lot of the bottom half of that league, for sure, without a doubt. And about this, so really, you're catching 5.5 points here. True sort of neutral core up in Buffalo, and Louisville's going to be the team that's bombs away from 3, and South Florida's probably going to get to the rim and score their points at the rim. Like that to me, plus you're going to give me 5.5 points. That may have to. I did see there was some 6.5. There's a couple that have had got faked right out of the gate and then came back. So for me, if you have 6.5 with South Florida, that is a fantastic number. But I feel like 5.5 is fair. I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you've missed anything to play Louisville or to play South Florida at plus 5.5. I don't know that I want it much lower than that. I do think that that's kind of the end of the value. I don't know that I'd play 5 or worse. However, if Mikel Brown gets ruled out, which I think is a pretty big, pretty good possibility that he doesn't play, I think that goes to more like 4, because I think it'll get bet down. Even though I think you and I are both what do you give his chances to play on Thursday? I think it's less than 50%, if I had to guess, based on what I've kind of heard.
I'd agree with that. That's the way I'm kind of looking at it right now. We're still up in the air with his status, but I haven't heard or read anything that's encouraging above 50% chance that he goes.
Yeah, so I'll segue into another player that I don't think is going to play on Wednesday, and that would be Edwards for SMU, BJ Edwards. Everything I've read suggests he's probably not playing against Miami of Ohio. So let's go back to Dayton. We'll talk another play-in round game. This is another one. Opened 7.5. Very quickly bet up yesterday while we were on the selection show, and then sort of market pushed it back down to 7.5. So again, this is another one where I think it is a fair. I think it's a fair price to if you're going to bet Miami of Ohio, I think betting it at 7.5 is fine. Yeah, you didn't get when they had smaller limits and shot the market up and then bet it right back the other way. Yeah, it'd be nice to have 8.5 or 9, but that probably wasn't that realistic for most people, given how quick it moved. So Rob, I'm gonna double down on what I said last night here. This is a opinion I lean into even more. I think Miami of Ohio has a great chance to not only win this game, but win the next game against Tennessee. They're home essentially in Dayton, 50 miles from campus. All their fans should be able to go to this game on Wednesday. So this is another one I'm giving some long, hard thought to. Miami of Ohio plus 7.5. That's a number that likely dips even further if Edwards is officially ruled out. And if he's at the ACC, these middling ACC to the bottom teams in this league this year just were not that good. So SMU has just done nothing for me this year. I haven't been overly high on them. I feel like they've been overvalued since the very beginning of the season. So I like Miami of Ohio as well. And that's another one where come Wednesday night, they might be without their best player or one of them.
Yeah, and this is fantastic because this is one where you're fired up in your lane, which is sides, and I'm fired up in my lane, which is total, because to me, this is a simple score fest. Miami of Ohio, we've seen it all season long, right? They're going to give up points. They're just not good on that end of the floor. SMU is going to score points because that's what they do, Edwards or not. They can get to 80. With him, they're obviously a much better offensive. I won't say they're a much better offensive team. They're a more well-rounded team. Miami of Ohio is going to score on SMU. You've talked a lot about how they spread out defenses and get good shots. They're going to get that against SMU. SMU is a terrible defense. Andy Enfeld has said it 2 or 3 times this year. SMU's done nothing to improve it. Honestly, this game has moved up 1 point from 163.5 to 164. So what they're asking me for here, if I was to do the quick math in my head, is an 86 to 79 game. I mean, I think both teams are getting into the 80s here. I don't think there's much defensive resistance on either side. If that's the case, then you certainly want the dog if you think they're both going to get into the 80s. I don't know how they stop each other, Adam, honestly. And I don't know which team really wants to stop the. I guess Miami of Ohio always wants to stop you. They're just not good enough defensively to do so. Boopy Miller could have a huge game. Pierre could have a huge game. And the Edwards thing is what it is. But what a draw was the first thing. When we were watching the show yesterday, I thought to myself, everything I saw, every projection I saw, and Brian Power kept referring to the Lenardi projections, the bracketologists, etc. But everyone that I saw had Miami of Ohio having to face Missouri. And I thought, man, I was even on a show in Columbia, Missouri last Friday afternoon. I said, guys, if Como gets Miami of Ohio, that's a good matchup for Mizzou. They probably win that game. But then Miami of Ohio gets SMU, and SMU is a much easier task because it's a sieve of a defense. So for me, I'm very high on the total going over. Listening to you, sounds like you're very high on Miami O, so maybe we can parlay together and put one here, get both sides of this one right.
Yeah, I mean, probably going to have to score to win that game, right? Like I can't really disagree with you there. And yeah, I may just, man, Rob, I might just do it. I might lock in South Florida before we get off the show here. I don't think it's going to get better than 5.5. I think it, like, briefly, it was like 6 at the open, maybe some 6.5, but like quickly down to 5.5. If Brown doesn't play, that's gonna go for that'll. What do you think? What do you think that line is? Do you think Brown being out is baked into that line, or no? Do you think it drops if he's announced out?
I think it's already baked in, but I also think it drops just because of the amount of public money that's bet on these games, Adam. This is something everybody's involved in. It's kind of like Super Bowl, right? Everybody's involved. Mikel Brown is the biggest name out there. For folks who haven't been around college basketball all season long, they're going to hear Mikel Brown is out, and the bandwagon begins. And the $50, $100 bets add up. $25, $50, $100 bets add up. So I would think that, 5.5 could see 4. Honestly, I think because of the rush of money, and for anybody who's ever been in a Las Vegas sports book, as these games begin to tip off, you know how long these lines are to get a bet in. It's crazy how much money gets bet right at the gun. Yeah, I could see it being forced if you wanted to wait on the Louisville side to get a better number. But if you're on the South Florida side, certainly, I don't know that it's getting any better. Now, if Brown is ruled in, Adam, I
Maybe
just
goes
don't
back
think
to
that's
6.
going to happen.
Does it go back to 6 if he's ruled in?
I think it does. But I don't think it's going to, we're trying to project here on Monday morning. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he'll play, but I'll try and investigate it a little more.
I think it's far more likely that this one goes back to, or this one goes to 4.5 or 4 than it is that it goes to like 6.5 or 6. And I think, yeah, because I guess I do have the Brown stuff baked in there. What I would adjust for him is kind of reflected in that number. But like you said, if he's ruled in, maybe it ticks up 0.5 point. If he's like confirmed out, you're going to see that steam, like that's going to get picked up with everyone trying to sort of bet this game. So I'll give it out on the show. I'm not gonna, since you guys are here and tuned in. We don't have any games to bet tonight. I'm gonna make this my first NCAA tournament bet. I just getting good at doing it on the phone, Rob. I was so bad at that, like when we rolled over the system, but
Yeah.
I'm getting good at locking plays in on the phone. I'm gonna bet South Florida plus 5.5. That is, they're probably the better team out of those two teams. And you're on a neutral floor, you're catching 5.5, and Louisville might take a bunch of threes. That's a good, in my opinion, that's a good bet. So I've talked myself into it. That is a play for me. South Florida plus 5.5. And hopefully it went in, because I now closed out of the window. I don't know if it was in or not. So we'll have to double check. But yeah. And then again, I'll have my eye on that SMU Miami of Ohio game. If I'd love an 8 or an 8.5 there, but again, I think if Edwards is ruled out officially, that probably dips further. That might go to 6.5, 6, even 5.5. So that's one I have my eye on as well. All right, let's get back to the chat. Mad Max is here. Mad Max wants to go back to Dayton. I'll tell you what, I mean, I'm more interested in the games in Dayton the next, more so than like the Thursday, Friday games right now, because they're sooner than obviously, and the market will, those are more likely to have like legitimate movement over the next day or two. So this game's actually tomorrow. And Mad Max says, I'm leading Texas, but it might be a really good situational spot for the Wolfpack. Rob, I'll remind you that these two teams played in Maui earlier this year. I was on the wrong side. I had NC State, and Texas just went absolutely nuts from three in that game. But what also happened in that game was Vokatitis was very effective, and Texas has improved a lot since then. So in the rematch, Rob, I think Texas has improved far more. Like, if you were to go back to Maui, Texas has improved significantly. NC State may have gone backward in a lot of cases. I'm not sure it's enough to get me to the window with Texas, but I like this Texas team, Rob. So convince me or talk me off, please. NC State, Texas, tomorrow night in Dayton.
Well, I will say this, and again, where NC State is concerned, my wife's nephew is an alum, and he and her brother-in-law both very, very active inside that program. So I get a little bit of info from them, and I will say this: I wouldn't disagree that NC State might have gone backwards. I will tell you that NC State fan base is not thrilled with their chances inside this tournament. They're so dependent, Adam, having watched them 5 or 6 times now. If Holloman and especially Copeland, like Copeland tends to dominate the ball a lot. But if Holloman's not banging threes, if McNeil isn't banging threes, and Copeland's trying to just do his thing one-on-one, they're a good scoring team, but they're also susceptible to 4 or 5 possessions in a row with nothing. Will Wade pulling the hair out of his head. They're not that great on the defensive end. I will say this the coaching matchup here is what probably shoves me towards Texas a little bit. Both of these guys are in their first year, right? Sean Miller took over Texas. Will Wade took over NC State. Both guys obviously want to at least win a first-round game. But I do think the presence, I think you hit it with Vokatitis, the interior presence, where Texas is just more well-rounded on the offensive end. Like, they can get their points a few more ways than NC State can. And, Will Wade keeps complaining about the defense, keeps complaining about them not being physical enough. And when I think of Sean Miller at tournament time, I do think he'll have his guys ready. Maybe it takes another year for Will Wade to get the guys in there that he really wants in there. And maybe we see a different NC State team next week. But I have a little asterisk next to Texas on my list here as a team that I'm looking toward playing. So I would agree Texas would be my side here. NC State doesn't have enough offensive diversity. Let's put it that way. They're just not a diverse enough scoring team for me. And I think Texas can shut them down, or not shut them down, but can at least contain them out on the perimeter. I don't think that's a crazy thought.
Tyon says, am I crazy for thinking Texas is a better team here? No, not at all. I don't think at all. I think you're crazy if you think NC State's better than Texas right now. I'm not saying NC State can't play a good game and beat them. But the one thing that Miller was so upset about earlier this year, getting into foul trouble, turnovers, getting into foul trouble. They've cleaned up quite a bit, and that was like the biggest thing for a while. It was like, well, Texas doesn't have a ton of depth in the front court, so if their bigs get into foul trouble, they're significantly worse. But I think they've actually done a fairly good job of not fouling as much down the stretch. Like January on, SEC play on, like Texas, in my opinion, was was consistently better than where the market placed them on a game-to-game basis. And I think that might be the case here as well. My number was closer to where it is, closer to pick. But NCAA tournament, win or go home. I kind of like this Texas team bet. I just something about NC State. The fact that they basically need Kadir Copeland, who was, on Syracuse for a while, went to McNeese State, and they basically need him to make plays to get into their offense. That's kind of an issue. So I'll say Texas. I'm not going to lock it in just yet, but I'll say Texas, just for the sake of argument.
Real quick, you're absolutely right. I kind of mumbled turnovers, but now it was that Saturday when you, I, and Kelly were on, and I read the Sean Miller quote. And it was full of expletives about them fouling everybody. We effing foul anything.
Yep.
He's kind of straightened it out a little bit.
Okay, let's so this is one that came up on the show last night. This is one where I think Cal Baptist might get crushed. I know Kelly brought up Cal Baptist, and I love listen, Dominique Daniels is an easy guy to root for. He stayed, right? He stayed at Cal Baptist because he wanted to be loyal to Coach Croy. He could have easily went and transferred up for his final year. Decides to go back to Cal Baptist. Incredible performance by him, much to my dismay. I had Utah Valley, and he stole that game single-handedly. But Rob, they don't score through the front court at all. They don't have a ton of size. How are they going to hang with Kansas here? Unless Kansas just is literally sleepwalks through this game, I'd be really surprised if Kansas doesn't just drop the hammer here, just based on the fact that Martell Williams and Dom Daniels how are they going to go nuts against Kansas? Those two undersized guards, and then you still have to deal with the Kansas front court.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about bad matchups for mid-majors. It's a bad matchup for a mid-major. And first off, I think a lot of Kelly's, case for Cal Baptist is just sort of anti-Darren Peterson, which I can understand a lot of folks just shrugging their shoulders about this guy taking some time off this year and not really, is he committed to playing? Is he got one eye on the NBA? But my thought process with him, even in the Big 12 conference tournament, has been he needs to show the NBA scouts in the biggest moments that he's making his case for number one pick overall, and it's a crowded field. It involves Boozer. It involves DeBansta. It involves Acuff. And right now, Darren Peterson has an opportunity against Cal Baptist to absolutely, the way these highlight packages go after a game is over. Darren Peterson, a 30-point performance, he'll be the talk of whatever day they play, Thursday or Friday. And, the national media will make a big deal out of him. But let's get past him for 1 second here. Melvin Council Jr. is another one of those guards that you're talking about. How is Cal Baptist going to get past these bigger guards? I've been absolutely a fan of Melvin Council Jr. all season long. And then inside with Badunga, I mean, this is a bad matchup for Cal Baptist. What they do best is play defense. What they don't do well is score in the interior, like you said. So you can see Kansas cleaning the boards, even getting out on the break, probably taking Cal Baptist out of what they want to do. It's just a difficult matchup. To the comment there that says I'm kicking myself for not hammering Kansas -9.5 when it came out. I think I might have overlooked it a little bit too, just because I didn't get too deep into it. Even when Kelly was mentioning it, I was probably looking at something else. I'm distracted. But I don't know, Adam. This looks like a game where KU can sort of name their number, so to speak, maybe pull Peterson out. End of game here. I just find it hard to see how Cal Baptist is going to score. And beyond that, I find it hard to see how they're going to defend. How these Kansas players don't get their share of points however they want, whenever they want.
9.5 is a great. I mean, if you have 9.5, that's great. I never saw it that low. That's an incredibly bad number. If someone put a 9.5 with Kansas, I figured. I think I saw 13.5. Now it's 14.5. I guess I don't want to totally give Cal Baptist zero chance here because of they are very good defensively. Like that's one thing. Like they're solid defensively, and Kansas is still going to have to execute their, on offense. They're not just going to be able to, go through the motions and score a ton on this team, because Cal Baptist will really pack it in. Their defensive rating is very good. But yeah, listen, Dom Daniels is he's like the type of guy that could go off in a game like this, and suddenly you have like Dom Daniels being a household name because he went for 35 or 40 and single-handedly had them in the game. I actually 14.5 is I don't hate the idea here. The more we talk about it, of thinking Cal Baptist can hang around, but I don't know if they you're right, Rob. It kind of feels like Kansas can name the score, but also if Kansas just kind of went through the motions and won by 9, I wouldn't be that surprised, just the way that this team has functioned a lot of this year. That's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, that's Bill Self's job, right? To make sure that they're motivated and ready to play. That's his. And I know he's had his issues this year. He doesn't come right out and say it, but he has had difficulty in his, seeing some of his post-game conferences talk about the Peterson situation. Like, what can I do, guys? He's going to do what he wants to do. But I think he'll come to play here. Love Council, White and company. They should have a good day here. I'll look into their team total in that one.
Rob, I've got one for you. I don't think that this team's going to win, even though I'll be rooting for them. But just the way Siena and Duke is going to play from a number of possession standpoint, I think that is a lot to ask for them to have to win that game by 30. Like, if you were to take a 1 seed and want to take the points with a 16, Siena sets up to cover as good as anyone, I think. And the reason for that is they're going to play extremely slow. They're very defensive oriented. That is going to be their main sort of focus, is the defensive end. Duke, we know Duke doesn't play very fast. They're going to be fine with getting into some of their half court offense and playing slow as well. I mean, Siena's a pretty good defensive team. Duke would have to execute so flawlessly, in my opinion, to win this game by 30. Are they going to win? Probably. But even if they only win by 20, Rob, yeah, you've got an awful big cushion there. I think this is up in the 28, 20. I don't know.
29.5.
So that's what I'm saying. 29.5. So Duke would almost probably have to shoot. They'd have to hit 60% from the field, in my opinion, to beat Siena by 30 points. There's just not enough possessions in the game, in my opinion. That's one that, from just a spread standpoint, I think Siena's a decent bet. And then Daryl says Siena can cover. That's about it. But yeah, what I'm not coming on here and saying they're going to win the game. Right. Saying that they're not going to lose by 31 or more.
And let me just give you really quick, Adam, another reason why that play makes so much sense from a situational standpoint. Duke's already got 2 guys injured, down 2 guys, right? And if they're up 25 with 6 left, they're not taking any chances that they're going to lose another player. Something freakish happens. Everybody's coming off the floor for the most part if you're John Shire, because you have a game in 2 days. So from Siena's standpoint, if you're within the number with 6 minutes left, you should be even more within the number at the end of the game, because Duke, I firmly believe Duke will, if they have a sizable margin, they're going to take everybody off the floor. And if they don't have a sizable margin, then you're covering anyway. So 29.5 is a lot of points. At 136, you talk about correlating parlays, dog and I mean, if it's going to be a game that hits 136, they're telling us 80-56, more than 80-56. They're telling us 82-54, 83-53, basically. That's a lot.
Yeah, and listen, Siena's struggles this year have come against teams that can really put them in a zone defense, force them to shoot a lot of threes. I will reference, Rob, the Indiana Siena game from earlier this year.
Yeah.
We talked about that game on one of our shows. I believe I gave Siena plus the points out. They were a pretty big underdog, 20-something point underdog. They were getting destroyed in that game early on. Like, it looked like Indiana was going to run away. And then as soon as the game was kind of in hand, Indiana went and played more man. And Siena battled all the way back, snuck in. I'll pull the final score of that game up real quick. It was the spread was like 23.5, 22, 23.5. It was an 81-60 final, but Siena won the second half 40-35. Why did they win the second half so easily? Because as soon as you start playing man against them, Gavin Doty's going to be able to work his way to the rim. He's going to be able to get to the basket. He's one of the best players at that level this year. He will likely go to a bigger school after this year. Tremendous mid-range game, so crafty getting to the hoop. So it's like, let's say it's a 30-point game with 10 minutes to go. There's a real chance that Siena wins that last 10 minutes anyway. Once it's like, all right, we're just going to go play some man. We're not trying to get hurt. We're not like totally hell-bent on like, squashing you defensively in those last 10 minutes. Maybe Shire get some of his bench guys in. I think that's a good bet. Siena plus the points. Someone's like, no one cares about Siena. I'm not saying you should care about Siena. You should care about like trying to hit bets and make money. And I'm telling you that plus 29.5, plus 30.5 is a good bet. That's all I'm saying. Has nothing to do with people caring about Siena.
When the goal is, can Siena get to 54, you're probably going to cover. That's not that hard of an achievable goal to get to 54 in that instance. I do remember the ending to that Indiana game, Adam. Man, that was a fun ending for Siena plus points that night.
All right, we'll go until, we started a few minutes late, so we'll go over by a couple minutes until I get like yelled at to get off. I don't know if there's anyone behind us, but even if there is, it's going to go up on demand. So let's go to the winner of that Duke Siena game. You assume it's Duke, and you will get the winner of this game. But this one, Rob, is quite intriguing for me. TCU, Ohio State. I've talked about TCU's guards quite a bit this year. How I love how how on top of you they are defensively. TCU beat Florida earlier this year. Those guards have a great chance to really disrupt an opposing team's guards, perimeter basketball, sort of make you have to they almost make you beat them in the front court a little bit more. And I think that's a little bit of an issue for Ohio State since they're so heavily reliant on Bruce Thornton. Rob, do you think TCU can take Thornton out of that game? And if so, can they win this game?
It's going to be Jamie Dixon's game plan. Again, you have to cut the head off the snake, and Dixon has. We've seen it in Big 12 play, right? That's a difficult conference with a lot of difficult guards, and TCU has shown up. And I think, Adam, another thing I think about TCU is they've gotten better as the season. And I won't say that Ohio State hasn't, because I think Ohio State has as well. This is such an evenly matched game, in my estimation. I really wanted to gravitate toward TCU in this case. But it could be a 3-point game either way. I could see this one coming down to the wire. Obviously, the line indicates that. I will say Ohio State does have a couple extra scoring options on their side outside of Thornton. But if you take Thornton out of it, they can disperse their points better, let's put it that way, than Ohio State can. And I don't know that Ohio State's quite as good defensively as TCU. So like I said, I'd like to gravitate toward TCU here. Just a scary game for me because I could see either side winning this one by 3 points. Total has jumped from 145.5 to 146.5. Ohio State games have tended to exceed that number And TCU, for what it's worth, has found their way into some high-scoring games too. So we'll look at that one a little further. But it's a good matchup, difficult game.
Yeah, I'm just not sold on Ohio State being able to win a game that Thornton doesn't completely go off in. And Daryl, I'll answer your question. Like, TCU's guards are better defensively than Ohio State's guards, in my opinion. So while TCU does not have a Bruce Thornton, they might have the more well-rounded backcourt. So, and someone said whoever controls the glass will win that game. I kind of think TCU controls the glass in that TCU Ohio State game. So if you subscribe to the theory that, okay, well, TCU is good enough defensively to neutralize Thornton and they're going to win the glass battle, then I think you have to like TCU. Especially, I think you're catching like what, 2.5? I think this one got up to 3, quickly bet back down to 2.5. So that's another one that I think we got to have our eye on. Okay, let's squeeze what we got. We got about 3 minutes left. No one has yelled at me yet. So I think, that was my fault because it was my microphone that just would not work. Could not figure out why. Let's finish up. I threw the Akron hoodie on today, Rob. So let's finish up with some Akron, Texas Tech. I'll let you go first. I like Akron here. I think Akron could hang around in this game. Without Toppin, Texas Tech isn't as big. So talk me off the Zips, or is this an underdog that you might get to the window with?
Well, I think the first major significant difference in this game is the fact that Texas Tech has played. I mean, this is a significant step down in defensive class for them. Texas Tech's been asked to play some of the best defenses in the nation this year inside that conference. We know it's a grinder. The MAC defenses, I don't know, make a case for any of them being any good. None of them are. So that's your significant difference. Now, the edge, or let's just say the positive on the Akron side, is they can score on just about anybody. All of that, when I was thinking this through earlier this morning, it was pushing me toward over in this game. I really think that the Texas Tech side has found a way to score. Maybe not as much, but they found a way to score without JT Toppin inside this lineup. They do have solid, that trio of Atwell and Anderson and Watson. These guys, they can hit threes as well as anybody in the country once they get going. I think there's going to be points here, Adam, because I do believe that Akron's got the ingredients offensively. And I just think that Texas Tech is going to find, as they get into this game, that this defense is nothing like Iowa State. This defense is nothing like Houston. This defense is nothing like what we saw all season long, and they'll be able to score their share too. So for me, it's an overplay. I haven't gotten there yet. Like we've said so often this morning, we've kind of taken our time in assessing these games and trying to get off our initial reactions. But this number is 155.5. And I could see here Akron as the underdog. I could see Akron finding their way to 75. And if that's the case, then this game's going to get over the number.
I guess the reason I'm so inclined to look toward the dog in this game is that Akron's a very small team. We've known this all year. They're just small. They take a lot of shots. They're going to probably need to hit a high percentage of threes to be in this game. But Texas Tech's not going to overwhelm you with big time size at this point. So if it does get into a shootout type game, Akron can shoot with anyone. That's where the appeal of this Akron team. But that be, the way you're talking about it, I think the over might actually make more sense because they could give up a boatload as well. So that'll be an interesting game, but I still lean Akron, but you make a good case for the over. It might actually be the better way to play that.
And don't discount John Gross's coaching ability in a tournament situation. I mean, he's been here before. He's a good head coach. Obviously, Texas Tech.
I don't think he's ever won one, Rob. I think he's 0 in the tournament. So he's very due for a win in one of these games.
And McCaslin, too. We won't sell McCaslin short on the other side.
Yeah. All right. We'll wrap it up here. This was sort of, so I saw some people talking about the NIT. That'll be a probably mostly what we talk about the next 2 days on this show. That's why I didn't go any NIT today. So tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll be focusing on the games that are on tomorrow and Wednesday. So we'll talk about the first 4, and then we'll probably dig pretty deep into the NIT the next 2 days, since those are the games that will be played on that day. Go back and check out our Selection Sunday instant reaction special, because we had a bunch of thoughts, good discussion for about an hour and a half. And we'll continue to come on Full Court Press. Not going to discourage you asking a question about a Thursday or Friday game, but the next 2 days will likely focus on what's ahead of us. Great NIT matchups, and then the first 4. So thank you guys for tuning in today. We'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern. I'll be back with a working mic. It will be at 10 a.m. Eastern, not 10:10. And we will see you guys tomorrow.